At 12 o'clock, with all final arrangements complete, the expedition moved out of the village amid the cheers and the good wishes of the great number of the villagers who had gathered to bid us goodbye. Our next stopping place, where we were obliged to cross a wide stream, was reached about 6 that evening. It was thought best to camp in order to prepare for the crossing, as this would consume the greater part of the next day. Since there was no bridge or boat, the crossing was accomplished by sliding across on a large cable made of plaited leather thongs that had been stretched across the river. The individual members of the party experienced no difficulty in negotiating the cable. The chief difficulty was in getting the horses and mules across. This was finally accomplished by making a strong sling from leather straps and arranging it so that an attachment would fit over and slide along the leather cable. This sling was first securely fastened around the animal's body, then secured over the cable, and the animal was pushed over the bluff, where it hung, suspended above the roaring torrent until it was pulled to the other bank. To this sling were attached 2 ropes of sufficient length to reach across the river, one serving to pull the animal across, while the other served to pull the sling back again for another animal. In this way, all crossed safely. We experienced no further difficulty, and aside from the crossing, we found the trail much better than the one we had followed going out. We arrived safely at our outfitting point, where the expedition was disbanded, and arrangements were completed for those who were to return home to go on to the seaport by the regular caravan route. The next morning, Emal joined us, and after bidding our associates goodbye, we started out on our return trip to the village of our former winter quarters. We again stopped 2 days to rest at the Bandit camp, where the 2 men remained, thus reducing our party to 7. These 2 men told their comrades of the remarkable trip they had made and the wonders they had seen. Our party was shown every courtesy, though, of course, our 3 friends came in for the greater honors. The leader of the band assured them that the bandits would hold the location of the cities absolutely sacred out of their respect for the consideration that had been shown them. And we were told there was very little danger of this band's ever attempting to go so far away. The desert bandits never invaded the mountains, nor did the mountain bandits invade the desert, for they were continuously at war with each other. So far as we know, they have faithfully kept their promise. The morning we left this camp, the leader of the band came and gave our chief a small silver coin, about the size and the weight of an English shilling, with a curiously wrought inscription upon it, saying that if any of the bandit bands in that country molested us, we would gain our instant release by showing this. He told us that it had been in the possession of his family for many generations, and that he cherished it very highly, but he wished our chief to have it as a token of his esteem. After examining it carefully, Emal said it was a very faithful reproduction of a coin that had been in use in the northern Gobi many thousands of years ago. The date showed that this particular coin had been made more than 700 years before. He then told us that these coins were worn as a kind of charm by some of the natives of the region, and the older the coins were, the more efficacious they were supposed to be. No doubt this particular one had been prized very highly by the leader and the whole band. From this village we continued our journey and arrived at our winter quarters in due time without further incident. We were welcomed heartily by the party which visited us in the desert and which we had left at the village, where we met the high priest. We were again invited to share the home of our former hostess, which invitation we gladly accepted. This time there were but 4 of us, as 7 of our associates had returned to India and Mongolia to carry on further research work. This arrangement had been suggested and agreed to in order to give us more time for the translation of the records. All was quiet in the little village, and we gave every moment of our time to the arrangement and form of the symbols and characters which made up the alphabet, placing them in the order that enabled us to use them, thus giving us an insight into the meaning of the words. In this we were assisted by Chandler Sin. While he was not with us all the time, he or our hostess was always at hand to help us over the difficult places. This continued until the last days of December, when we noticed that a number of the people were again congregating for the yearly gathering. They were nearly all people we had met at the gathering the year before. We found that this year they were to meet in the temple and use the center room of the 5 upper rooms that were arranged along the ledge as already described. We went up to this room early New Year's Eve in order to meet and talk with those who had gathered. We found that they were from numerous places, and they told us of things that had happened in the outside world, with which we were beginning to feel we had lost all contact. Yet we had been happy in our work. The time had passed rapidly, and we were very content. While we were talking, one of the guests came in and said that the moon was very beautiful. A number of those in the room, including all of our party, walked out upon the ledge. It was indeed a beautiful sight from that elevation. The moon had just risen and seemed to be floating through a great bank of delicate colors, which were reflected on the vast expanse of snow that covered mountain and valleys, and colors were continuously changing. Someone said, "Oh, the clarion will ring tonight." The carrion. In a few moments the bells did ring. At first it was as though a bell located afar off had been struck 3 times. Then smaller and smaller ones sounded, coming nearly until they seemed but tiny bells, located directly at our feet. So real was the impression that we looked down expecting to see the bells. This melody continued until it seemed as though thousands of bells were being struck in perfect harmony. The bank of color would rise until it appeared to be even with the ledge where we were standing, and it would seem as though we could step out upon it, so completely did it shut out the earth below. As the colors raised in undulating swells, the sound of the bells would increase until the melody filled every niche. It appeared as though we were standing on the stage of a great amphitheater, with thousands of dim forms and faces of those listening to the bells. Then a full, strong tenor voice began to sing "America," and in an instant thousands of voices took up the words, while the bells carried the melody. Thus the song went booming on until the end, when voices back of us said, "America, we greet you." Then others said, "We greet the whole world." We turned, and there stood Jesus, the high priest, and Emil. We had become so enraptured by the phenomena that was taking place about us that we had become wholly unconscious that there were others near us. All stepped aside to let the 3 enter the room. As Jesus turned, we could see that remarkable light that always shone out when he was present, and as he stepped through the door, the whole room became a blaze of white light. All went in and were seated at the tables. Lost my place. Jesus was seated at the first table, and the priest at our table, with Emil and our chief on either side. This time there were but 2 long tables down the length of the room. There were no coverings, but as we were seated, the tables were covered with white linen, and the service came on almost as quickly. The food seemed to come with the plates, with the exception of the bread. A loaf appeared on the table before Jesus. He picked it up and began breaking it, placing the pieces on a plate. When the plate was filled, a dim, childish form lifted it and stood silent. until 7 plates had been filled, and 7 forms stood holding them. As Jesus broke the bread and filled the plates, the loaf did not diminish. As the last plate was filled, Jesus arose and with outstretched hands said, "This bread which I present to you represents God's pure life. Partake of that pure life which is always of God." Then, as the bread was handed around, he went on to say, "When I said, 'I am lifted up,' and that by being so lifted up I would draw all men to me, I knew that in the light of that experience, someday all would see eye to eye and know full well when they could be lifted up as I am lifted. I saw heaven right here on earth among men. This is the truth that I perceived, and the truth will make all free. Then they will find that there is but one fold and one shepherd, and if one strays, it is safe to leave all the 99 to seek the one that he may return. God may be all in all to all his children, and all are his. They are far nearer and dearer to him than the sparrows are the lilies of the field. If he rejoices in the lily's growth and notes the sparrow's fall, how much more does he note the growth of his dear children? Neither does he judge them more than he does the lilies or the sparrow, but holds them dear to his great cause, and not one can be left out when his perfection is established." I could see that if this ideal could be graven in letters of purest gold on the walls of the temples of the world's great thought, it would lift men's thoughts above the murk and mire by setting their feet on a rock, a sure foundation, where the winds and tides could lash and roar, but while men stood steadfast and true, they would be secure. Because of this security, peace, and calm, they would aim to the heights where they see their true dominion. They may soar above, but they will not find heaven above. They will find it right among men, and it is not reached by merely plodding on and on, in toil and in sorrow and great tribulation, and then eventually finding the great jewel. It is much more quickly reached by throwing off all materiality and the laws that thereby bind men to the eternal will. Then step forth. You pick up the jewel, incorporate it, let the light shine forth. And you have gained, by one direct step, that which you may put off through all eternity, if you will. You will find that the soul, which insists upon immediate and complete spiritual illumination and emancipation here and now, and knows that his relation to God is the relation of parent and child, quickly sees that this not only makes clear the divine possibilities, but that he has them to use, and they will work for him as he wills. To that one, the New Testament story will not be fiction, nor a vague dream that may happen after death, but an ideal that is lifted up before the world of a perfect realization of a life of love and service. That ideal is the divine accomplishment of all here and now. Then will they know the vision I saw when I said, "Many shall seek to enter in and shall not, for strait is the gate, and narrow is the way that leads to eternal life." For without the true appreciation of the Christ ideal and of the divine and perfect plan of the cooperation of man and God right here on this earth, the realization of this ideal is impossible, and it becomes only a dream, a myth, nothing. The door giving access to this omnipotent and transforming alchemy of the Spirit in man is open to all at all times, and the key to its opening is in the thoughts of all. When two ideals and methods of salvation are of securing the saving grace of God's love are different, it is man's thoughts and not God that made them so. Those who close the door to the immediate blessings of God for all his children isolate themselves from the immediate themselves from the immediate blessings that God bestows upon the Christ child and from the spiritual illumination of the transcendent alchemy of spirit and all potent powers which are theirs to use as the Christ would and should use them. When men recognize this, the leper will be made whole instantly. The withered arm will be restored, and all diseases of body and mind will vanish at their touch. Through the concentration of the spoken word, they will multiply the loaves and fishes, and as they break the bread or pour the oil for the multitude, it will never diminish, but there will always be an abundance left. They will calm the raging sea or tempest by their command, and gravitation will be overruled by levitation. For their command is the command of God. Then will they know my thoughts when I gave forth my opening message to the world as I left the temple that day, when I said, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand." And have faith in God, and nothing is impossible to you. All who believe they can do the works that I do and will come forth and do them may do even greater works than I have done. They will know that it is a process of living the life, believing and knowing. Then absolutely nothing is impossible to them. They will know that the Holy Spirit, the whole of the divine Spirit in them, says today, just as it did long ago, that if they hear its voice and harden not their hearts, they will find they are the light of the world, and they that follow that light shall not walk in darkness. They will know that they are the door by which all enter into the light of life, and those who will go in and out by that door will find eternal peace and great joy, and will discover that now is the accepted time. They will find that the Christ but opens the door to their own souls, and the Spirit that dwells therein is the all-potent alchemy, as limitless as the universe of God is limitless. The alchemy will dissolve and transmute all manner of sickness, will erase clean the mortal life of guilt and the effects of sin, will illuminate the soul with the perfect light of wisdom, will emancipate from and dissolve the darkened conditions of human life into the perfect light of life. Thus they will see they are not only children of nature, but children of God as well. They will bring forth the absolute perfection of the individual, and thus will perfect the race. They will bring forth the ideal and the divinely inspired prophecy concerning the final destiny of man here on earth, the identity of Father and Son, which is the second birth, the perfect mastery of man over every condition and circumstance. Here Jesus paused, and the lights became brighter and brighter. Then pictures began to appear. The scenes were glorious bursts of splendor. The pictures would come on, a transforming hand would reach out and touch them, and they would develop into a great whole and become beautiful. There came on a great war scene. We saw men struggling and fighting against each other. The cannons were belching forth flames and smoke. Shells burst overhead, and among the great throng, and men were falling on every hand. We could hear the roar and din of battle. Indeed, it was so real that it seemed certain a battle was in progress. But in the transforming hand, as the transforming hand reached out and over it, all became calm in an instant, as those who had been fighting so furiously but a moment before looked up. The hand traced in flaming letters that seemed to spread over the whole scene. Peace, peace, the blessed peace of God surrounds you. You can only hurt and destroy the mortal, but one of God's own you cannot destroy, and you are all his own children. You can neither hurt nor destroy each other. Then, for a moment, it seemed that men were again determined that the struggle should proceed. This determination showed on many faces, especially those of the leaders. But it appeared that the more determined they became to go on, the less cause there seemed to be for a display of force. It also seemed that the more they attempted to discharge the weapons of destruction, the less effect they had, for try as they would, not a weapon could be used. Then the hand went on to trace. Behind every cloud or storm or war, if men will only look, they will find God. They will find that God did not create the clouds of storm or war, that man created them. And if they will look beyond and see, they will always find God's hand upraised in peace. War is not sent or ordained by God. When men war with each other, they are entirely outside of God's province or power. They are entirely immersed in a man-made realm where God cannot interfere in any way, and they will be obliged to go on in this way until they see the fallacy of such strife. If one is sufficiently strong in his realization of God power, knows his ability to cooperate with that power, and does cooperate, he can stop a war instantly, just as you saw it stopped in this picture. Then Jesus continued, I chose the way of the cross. It was not my Father's choice for me, but my choice, that all might see they can so perfect the life in the body, that although it be destroyed, it can be rebuilt and become more triumphant. The lights grew even brighter until every vestige of limitation had disappeared. Not a wall surrounded us, not a roof overhead, nor a floor beneath. We all stood together in boundless space. The 12 disciples came and arranged themselves near the great Master, but did not surround him, for his presence stood out far more prominently than any other, with a never-to-be-forgotten brilliance and purity. The invisible choir boomed out, His kingdom is here, for of and among men. Now henceforth and forever, one man, one God. The transforming hand again appeared and traced the words, His kingdom is here now, among men, henceforth, forever, one man, one God. Then directly over Jesus' head were traced the words, all for one for all. Buddha then appeared, standing at Jesus' right. The priest and Emal walked to them and knelt before them. Emal at Buddha's right and the priest at Jesus' left. Jesus clasped Buddha's party's upraised hand. They raised their free hands until these were over and just above the heads of the two who were kneeling, and said, Peace, peace, peace. A glorious peace rest over all. We receive you, our dear brothers, into the great council of God's beneficent love, and that love and fellowship includes the whole world. Then all those assembled bowed their heads and made way as the four passed through the assembly. As they passed, the disciples and a number of those assembled followed, and all passed on until they disappeared from our vision. When they had begun moving through the assembly, the invisible choir had chanted, We make way for these mighty brothers of love. For that love, the mighty love of God, redeems and unites all mankind in the great council of God's love and brotherhood of man and God. As they passed from view, the great bell boomed out 12 strokes. Then for a moment the bells pealed a merry refrain, and thousands of voices joined in. We bring the glad new year and a brighter day for all the world. Our second year with these great souls had closed. And I am now at the end of that book too. And I will put these all together and put a playlist of them over in the description bar so you can have the entire playlist right there at your disposal. Also, I will put the other of the 5 books, the playlist for them as well, over into the description bar. This is the Dove Lady, over and out for now.